VideoLAN was a student project. It was called Project 2000 because they wanted to play video games and they had a very old token ring network. Everything crashed after 50 seconds, but the demo was 45, so that was fine. A few guys said, well, maybe other people care about this VideoLAN streaming project. I was mostly doing networking and streaming, but I was not coding, right? 2006, another internship that was also extremely boring, and that's how I started to actually code a lot.
I'm glad you were so bad at picking internships.
The problem is, what do I watch and how? I'm working for a project around that, an aggregator around videos. Everything you watch, whether it's legal or illegal, gets added to your profile.
I'm Matt, the organizer of the SF Video Technology Meetup and the Demuxed conference.
And I'm Steve, creator of VideoJS, the open source video player.
And I'm Phil, the director of Media Technologies Engineering at Bright Cove, previously building BBC iPlayer in London.
And you're listening to Demuxed, a podcast for and by engineers working with video.
Demuxed is brought to you by Heavybit, a program dedicated to helping startups take their developer products to market. For more information, visit heavybit.com.
We're always looking for topics, so if you have any suggestions or just want to tell us how wrong we are, you can find us on Twitter at Demuxed.
Hey everybody, welcome to Demuxed. Today we have JB Kempf from the VideoLAN team. Really excited we were able to get him in person following FOMS and Demuxed. So thanks for being here today, JB.
Thanks for having me.
So real quick, today Phil and Steve couldn't join. So again, we have Nick joining us, Nick Chadwick.
I'm very excited. This is the second time. I think I'm going to become a regular, I can tell.
Yes. It's the accent factor again. Mm-hmm. So JB, why don't you give us a little background about yourself?
So I'm a French engineer. I'm 34 years old, I think. If I'm not mistaken. I'm the president of the VideoLAN nonprofit organization I created in 2008. And I've been working on video-related technology since 2005, or maybe even before. I'm a developer, obviously, a geek. And I have now a startup around video technologies.
I had no idea you had a startup. Outside of VideoLAN?
Yes.
Cool, what is it? Or that you can talk about, at least, I guess.
So VideoLAN is a nonprofit and VideoLabs is a startup. Because one of the problems we have with VideoLAN is the lack of funding and the lack of involvement of people. But doing a startup is a cool thing to do, right?
It is pretty cool.
But we can talk about that a bit later, I guess.
Great, cool. So yeah, I guess it probably makes sense to give people a little background about VideoLAN itself. I think kind of anybody that's been in the industry for more than 10 minutes recognizes the cone and the hats, and
or like anyone who was a student
or anybody that's ever watched a video on their computer when it didn't work and needed to download something else. So yeah, I guess let's start off with just what is VideoLAN and how you got involved.
Yeah, okay. So VideoLAN is a project, a software project like Mozilla is. And there is many software that are developed by the VideoLAN nonprofit and the VideoLAN team. One of them is VLC, but that's not the only one. X264 is a VideoLAN project, and we have a lot of other, mostly libraries for developers related to video codecs, demuxes, and so on, that are made by the nonprofit. VideoLAN client became VLC, is the most known software, but it's not the only one. So in fact, VideoLAN was a student project, and at the beginning in 1994, it was called Project 2000. Project Network 2000 was a way for the students of the École Centrale Paris campus, which is a university south of Paris, to get a new network because they wanted to play video games, and they had a very old token ring network, which was great in 1994, except for video games because the latency was crap. So they wanted to go and get a new network, and no one wanted them to get a new network because it was a lot of money. So they went to see a few companies, and one of the companies was a French broadcaster and says, TV by satellite is the future. Well, it's easy to laugh now, 20 years after.
Wow, so TV by satellite wasn't around when VideoLAN was created?
It was just starting, 1994, right?
That's incredible.
And was just like, that was the idea, right? And the problem is that there was 1,500 students on the campus. And that meant you had to put like 1,500 boxes of decoders, of MPEG-2 decoders, which costed $2,000, and also like 2,000 like satellite dishes. So one of the guys says, okay, if you're able to have only one satellite dishes and one decoder and stream it on the network, then and decode on the PCs, then I pay you a new network. So of course 10 years. That was 10 years before YouTube, right? So now it's obvious, but at the time when they started the project, we were talking about processors that were the 486 and the Pentium 60 and 90. So that was like science fiction to do MPEG-2 SD decoding on a machine. But the students said, okay, deal. So they started the project, which was Project Network 2000, and took more or less 2 years to have a proof of concept that managed to stream 2 pieces of video. 45 seconds. The machine was like packed with 64 megabytes of RAM or something. And of course, everything crashed after 50 seconds, but the demo was 45, so that was fine. And they got the new network. And that's how the Project Network 2000 started. And the only idea was to play video games with lower latency. So they had an awesome network, very expensive at that time. And after that, 1997, a few guys who were also students on the same place said, well, maybe other people care about this VideoLAN streaming project, and maybe we should do that as open source. So they restarted the project and called it VideoLAN, because it's video on a local network. Mm-hmm. And there were 3 important pieces: the VideoLAN server, the VideoLAN client, and of course some stuff doing some switching on the network level that made no sense outside of this student university network. And that's how it started. It took them 2 years to make it open source because the university wanted to keep that in order to resell MPEG-2 decoders or something like that. It completely failed. And so in 2001, it became open source. All the software, there was like VLC, VLS, VLCS, VLM, and others. And VLC, when they started to make it open source in 2001, started to like really get traction, especially because it was ported on the Mac by some guy from, I guess, Netherlands. And that was the only way on macOS to play DVDs.
Wow, so that was pre-QuickTime?
QuickTime couldn't play DVDs. For a long time, you needed iDVD.
Oh, okay. So one of the first features that came out of this VLC project after it was open source was DVD playback.
Yes.
Because DVDs are MPEG-TS under the hood?
Well, exactly. So it's MPEG-PS, but as soon as you have your MPEG-2 audio decoder and your MPEG-2 video decoder, then TS and PS are not that difficult and not that dissimilar. So it was easy to add. And as soon as you could hack and destroy the DVD CSS protection, which was not really a protection since it's so weak, they added that. And like after being open source, like in 3 months, someone ported it on the Mac, and then in 6 months, someone ported it on Windows. And that's how VLC started getting actually popular. In fact, VideoLAN is the project that did a lot of those stuff that are related to network streaming and video streaming and servers and clients and so on. Normal people just use VLC as a client, which was at the beginning like only playing MPEG-2. And then someone added another decoder, and then someone added LibAV codec at some point. And then like we were in 2003, and that eDonkey, Kazaa, eMule, or whatever those stuff that none of us have ever used, of course, went around. That was one of the best way to play DivX, because DivX MPEG-2, MPEG-4 ASP was so great. You could like put your DVD on a CD for the same price. So that's a bit the difference between VideoLAN and VLC. And the second very important project was started in 2004, I believe, which was X264, the H264 encoder that was started by Laurent Aymar for his third year project. And that became probably the most used encoder in the world, I guess.
Probably. I'm not sure there's any doubt at this stage.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated just by like one little snippet you had there is the core innovation that VLC had that got it off the ground was this software MPEG-2 decoder, but the university couldn't find a market for it. Like there was no commercial market for an MPEG-2 decoder.
Well, there was. The problem is that it was a student project, which would be a bachelor project, and like the allocated time was 150 hours per student, and the students put 150 hours per month, and so they said, well, we want to be open source. It was like pure GPL, and they didn't care at all about making money. Also, there was so many questions about patents and licensing on MPEG-2 that they didn't really care. So they were more focused on having good technical background and having fun, And that was one of the reasons VLC became popular, is that because there was no marketing, no business around. It was just like, because we care, it's going to be good engineering, and we want people to be happy. And that's what drove VLC for a long time. What helped VLC really start on Mac was the MPEG-2 decoder for DVDs, which is a bit different from what made it popular on Windows, though.
I don't think you talked about like how you got involved. Is it while you were in school? Is it afterwards? And then from there, I'd love to hear like your take on why you think VideoLAN is important in today's world.
Sure.
Besides from being the most used encoder.
I went to this university called École Centrale Paris in 2003. I was a student there, and I was a vice president and manager of the network of the student network, because that was managed by a nonprofit that was only managed by students. So the whole campus network was done by students and not by the university at all.
That's incredible.
It's incredible, but it's because, in fact, it's a private campus on a public school, which never exists in Europe, or at least not in France. But for historical reasons, like everything on the campus was managed by students, which is great because like it helps you to learn so much more than listening to some old professor dude that, you know, is just going to give you theory. In real life, you care about projects and doing projects. So I was a student there, and I started to be the vice president and the manager of the whole network. I think in the end, we were only two to actually work seriously on the network. The second one is Rémi Denis-Courmont, who's still a VLC developer, probably the biggest VLC developer from the same year. And when I was at the university, I was mostly doing networking and streaming and multicast and so on. And I spent a lot of time also deploying 70 Wi-Fi access points on the campus. That was my second year project. But I helped already on the VideoLAN project, mostly on the streaming part in 2004, but I was not coding, right?
Was that still working? Was the central goal you said was to take a single satellite feed, decode it once, and stream it to everyone who wanted to watch TV on the campus? Was that still up and running?
Yeah, exactly. That was still, we had like, I think it was around 120 TV channels, and some of them were encrypted. So we had like developed something that was just decrypting and removing the key and restreaming that. So that's a VideoLAN project called libdvb CSA, which is just removing CSA or opening or whatever you call that.
Liberating, I think, is the...
Liberating. Okay, I need to use that word for DRM now. I'm not breaking DRM, I'm liberating the media. And that was still working and quite well, right? And also we were doing some H.264 tests very early. I don't think it was 2004. VideoLAN was the campus one was where a lot of testing were done by public broadcasters from Europe and so on, because it was awesome network and good technologies. So I didn't really code on VLC at that time. I started mostly coding when I was doing an internship in 2005, and I was bored as hell because there was not enough to do during the internship. So I started helping mostly because I didn't have like really a programming background, right? In my university, I did generic engineering. I didn't go that much to lessons although, so didn't do a lot of development. 2005, I started to help on the forum, on helping people and giving a few patches like normal. And then in early 2006, I believe, was when I was another internship that was also extremely boring. And that's how I started to actually code a lot. I had to work a lot on porting on Windows because no one maintained the Windows port. And that's how I started coding, because I had no idea how to code at that time.
Wow, so we wouldn't have the Windows port of VLC unless your internships had been boring?
Well, you probably wouldn't have a VLC those days. And so...
I'm glad you were so bad at picking internships.
So then I moved to San Francisco for 1 year, working for the French consulate that was on Bush Street at that time. And also that was extremely boring. And but I stayed 1 year. It was amazing. I went to meet so many startups and so many cool tech people. But when I came back, I said, okay, we need to do something about that. And during that year, in fact, I started like recruiting new people, because in 2007, early 2007, we were only 2 left on the VLC project. So I spent a lot of time during 2007 and 2008 to get new students, to get new people, say, hey, you know, it's open source, it's cool, and so on. And also like help for people to actually get involved, because it was quite difficult at that time. And when I come back from the US in end of 2008, I create the first VideoLAN Dev Days meetings, and I create the nonprofit at that time. And I spend then all my time to get all the assets, IP and whatever from the school, and move them to the VideoLAN nonprofit that was started in 2008. And I've been the president since.
That's an incredible way to like start getting involved.
Well, also like I spend a lot of time doing what no one wants to do, answering on the forums, answering emails, support, compiling for Windows, working on Windows XP and other those horrible operating systems that no one wants to use.
So things that are only marginally more fun than the boring internships. Is that kind of what I'm hearing here?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time on VideoLAN doing the stuff that no one wants to do, right? And that's how you make yourself usable, right? Useful. I now know how to code correctly in numerous languages, but like compared to many others, I'm like just like, well, I know how to write good C and decent C++, and write some assembly. I can read it without problem, and a lot of scripting. But like there are some people who are way better, right? Mm-hmm. And one of my big role is to understand most of the technologies and be able to review patches, but also understanding the bigger picture and spend time so that those people who are better than me can actually be very efficient. And that is one of the main goals I've set. And I think it kind of worked, right? Like VLC moved from 2003, where we had like a total of 1 million downloads, mostly on the Mac, to probably 1 billion in 2011. And now, I don't know, 2, 3, I don't.
No big deal.
No.
Well, it doesn't matter the number of downloads for us, because first, like download doesn't mean active user. It could be like an update. And also like a lot of people download outside of our websites, right? Because they go to download.com or vlc.de or other websites, right? And a lot of our users are on Linux, right? And of course they go through the distribution. So it doesn't really matter the number of downloads. It's really good for the press people who love to have like big numbers, and they can do But in fact, it's not what is important. The important is that are people happy, and do we serve a good purpose? And that is the most important part.
So I'd love to hear, so the story you gave is you came back from San Francisco in 2008 and set up the nonprofit and started just trying to like build the community. That was almost 10 years ago now. So what have you been up to in the 10 years? Did you come back out to San Francisco and work again?
No. So when I was in San Francisco, I worked on a Franco-American startup which was doing peer-to-peer streaming video in 2008 that failed very badly. I remember meeting some guy, I think it was Justin from Justin TV at the time, who said, you know, bandwidth it's not worth the complexity. So that failed. And then from 2009 to 2012, I worked in a CTO of a small startup that was like doing some great stuff. And it was like a kind of video Spotify. Basically, the problem is that it takes a lot of time to actually decide what you're going to watch. And it was like, it looked like a TV, but it was like recommended, relinearized as VOD. But we started that with video and with music videos. And, you know, you played one, and it moved to the next one, and it moved to the next one. But, like, if you showed that to my mom, she would say, well, yeah, it's a normal TV, but the only thing is that you can say like or next. And that's a bit like what you see now at the end of the YouTube videos, right? Where they move to the next one.
Or things like Pluto.tv, which are doing quite well now.
Yes, but that was 2009, and a lot of the problem on that was basically working with content providers who are like obtuse that they don't want to move to anything. And they're, but I don't have the right, and blah blah blah. And the scaling and the time frame for development of those stuff is like 18 months and so on, and that's not a time scale that works for a startup. So I think we died in 2012. And at that time, I was also doing more and more VLC work and was taking, I had 2 jobs, right? So in 2011, I went to the nonprofit and said, well, we need to do like Mozilla, which has a nonprofit and a corp. We need to do something like that. And well, most of the nonprofit is French, so they were just like, what will happen in 5 years if the company dies, and who will develop VLC, and what, blah, blah, blah. I have no clue. I can't tell you, right? I had no idea at that point. And I would lie, just say, well, we're going to do great. I have no idea, which was the honest answer. So in 2011, we didn't do that. But the problem was, if you wanted to go to smart TVs, iPhone, and so on, you can't just like work on your laptop, right? Developing for mobile is extremely painful and extremely costly. It's even worse now, right? So in 2012, I decided to do my own consulting company, separate from the nonprofit. The idea would be to do like the commercial arm of the nonprofit. That was in end of 2012. And I've been working at this company and leading this company ever since. Most of the development today for mobile is developed by the company, but a large part also of VLC. However, the owner of the copyright is still the nonprofit, the editor is still the nonprofit, but the rest is on the company. So if the company dies, VLC doesn't, right?
Right. Got it.
It shouldn't die though, but...
Before we move on or beyond background, I'm very curious where the cone came from in all of this.
So that's a good question, and usually I refuse to answer that one, especially when it's recorded. But I answered to that on a big Ask Me Anything on Reddit last week or the week before. I won't get all the details because some of the details are too private, but it's really like linked to this non-profit that was managing the network in the École Centrale Paris. So when I arrived in 2003 in École Centrale Paris, the geek building, all the geeks were in the same building on the campus. And they had a collection of cones that was insane. And when I say insane, like on the floor for 24 people, they had maybe 200 cones. And and there was there was this absolutely insane cone culture. And when I mean cone culture, it's like they were doing like competitions, right? Like, there was the acrobatic cone where they were throwing themselves from the first floor on a big mattress with cones to do like acrobatic jumping, and people were like judging that. There was, of course, the cone bowl where they were playing a kind of like, I guess, a kind of baseball with cone. There was just like also like a competition of cone editing. So they did like a lot of shots of cones around the campus fighting and so on. So there was like this huge
they're just living that cone life.
Worshipping, in of course a joking sense, right? Not anything weird, but just like worshipping on the cone. And it was extremely funny. And that kept. The question that's always what I've said. What people ask me is, how did it start? Well, it started when they had this very fast new network. And this very fast new network got connected to 100 megabits per second to the internet.
Wow.
Sure. Like, yeah. We're talking 1999. And that starts to be quite fast, right? And of course, students did stuff. They did do like downloading stuff, right? The people, basically, someone say, well, that's not okay, especially since it went to the network from the French education network. So it was absolutely not okay. So the school, the university went to see the students who say, okay, we know who he is, we'll manage that. But they didn't know what to do, right? Because they never forbid actually to do that, and they also didn't want to give the name and so on. So they went, they had these like dinners outside of the campus every month in order to discuss about the problems of the nonprofit outside of the campus. And one of the time they actually discussed about this problem. And so on their way back, they might have had a few beers, I guess. There was some construction just next to it. And some guy actually took a cone and went on the campus. And they while discussing that, they started screaming the name of the person with the cone. So they used the first use of the cone was actually to use that as a porte-voix, I don't know.
Megaphone?
As a megaphone, right? And when they went back to bed, they kept the cone, right? And like almost at the same time, and this is before my time, so I'm not sure, but almost at the same time, one guy rewrote the X11 video output for Linux on VLC, and he finished at 4.5, and there was a lot of fighting, not fighting, but competition in the early VLC developer days, where people wanted to put features that the other didn't. And in order to just show that he actually finished the X11, because that was a big topic before another guy did it, he actually checked in the code and put a cone, a small cone, because it was just like after the megaphone event that was around. And he put this cone just to say, well, I push it at 5 a.m., but I pushed it first, and here is the cone, right? And so the next morning, people can actually go on from what he started, but he was the one who started it. And the cone stayed for a bit, and the cone stayed, right? So those two events, and then started like the cone culture or cone worshipping, and that kept. The thing is, it's completely insane and stupid to use a cone for a video software, but it's so great. Like, no one in their sane mind would do that, but that it's so distinctive, right? You do a web browser, okay, I'm going to take a Earth and add some stuff. Yes, of course. Oh, I'm going to take a video player and YouTube. Oh, I'm going to use a play button and maybe a square, like that would remind you to the TV. Like, one of the reasons VLC got popular is that because a lot of people don't use VLC, they use the cone player. And that is one of the reasons why, even though we receive one email per week saying that, oh, you should change your logo, we will not change the logo. But in the beginning, it was just like a kind of funny mistake and no one cared. It was like 20 people were using the software at that time. It was not even open source. It's like a funny mistake, right? But it's a bit like the Christmas holiday season hats that VLC has every last 10 days of the year. It was not meant to be live. But it was like during the development of the Qt interface in VLC, it was just like we knew it was going to be very long to actually release. But for like the developers to have fun, we added that, right? Well, Raphael added that. But then when we pushed it to production, we kind of forgot to remove the thing that was changing the cone to a Santa Claus hat, and that's how it started. And then people started insulting us for having this holiday season hat, and people were so like insulting that we said, well, we are going to keep it because
that's so French. I love it.
There is no way you insult us on something we do on our free time for like no money. You're not like our clients. We do something. We're happy if you're happy, but like never insult us or attack us because of some silly mistake. So that's why also we decided, well, we keep it.
I love the icon and the logo. But that story was so much better than I expected it to be. Cone culture is a phrase I never expected to hear. But
I love that you guys knew that there was one person on your network who was pissing everyone off, and some guy at 1 a.m. was screaming his name through a cone.
Well, I don't know how the US campus are, but that was like a very, very... it's a small campus, and it's a very friendly environment, and it's an engineering school, so that wasn't out of line, right?
Totally. I love it. Yeah. I think it'd be awesome to talk a little bit about like what the current world of VLC looks like. So at FOMS, you told us a little bit about VLC 3. Do you mind giving the audience a little feedback there? So
we're starting being very serious for the Android port of VLC and the iOS one in 2012 and 13, and the whole like infrastructure of VLC wasn't actually perfect for that. Mostly because on mobile you need hardware decoding. There is absolutely no discussion, right? So the code base from VLC on Android, on iOS, and the one from the desktop was a bit different, and that gave us those absolutely insane namings where the iOS version is at 2.7, the Android version is at 1.5, and the WinRT version is at 0.5, and the desktop is 2.2. I mean, it makes no sense. So a lot of work we spent on 3.0 was to actually have like one version that we're going to release at the same time on all the platforms and have hardware decoding everywhere by default. Because, well, now we're talking about UHD, right? And 4K, and like your laptop is using now 12 watts, and you can't keep up, especially since we're starting 4K, 60 FPS, 30 megabits per second. That's not insane, but like just in software, your machine is almost dying. 3.0 has hardware decoding 4K HDR by default on all the platforms. HDR also depends on the platform because there is lots of discussion on that. We have everything related to 360 videos, so you can play your 360 videos. And of course, we also have like third order ambisonic, so 3D audio. I'm not sure there is many players that actually do third order ambisonics and not first order. But the result is so much better. And so that's like the first really important part, hardware decoding and 360. The second important part is everything related to browsing your local network. VLC was always able to do like UPnP browsing, but very badly. And now that your laptop is like, and a lot of people have NAS, it makes sense to have a better improvement and support of that. So now you can actually list files on Samba shares, DLNA, UPnP, NFS for the 5 people who actually use that, SFTP and so on. So that was kind of like a large work we did. And finally, supporting a lot of new crappy formats. Because like what I try to get people to remember is that VLC plays everything and runs everywhere. But the thing is, it's not always everything. There are lots of like weird cases that we didn't support. So we spend a lot of time, especially 2 guys in the team have spent the last 2 years finding weird samples of the old QuickTime days of the 1990s, finding some people who put some 608 inside MP4 in a different way than it should do, some like non-defined MP4 boxes, and some people who put VP8 and VP9 inside OGG because they can, or work on stuff like WebVTT or TTML and so on. So the list of the number of formats that we support is huge. Yeah, so that's mostly for 3.0. Then there is so much other stuff. We can now store dialogues. We can store passwords for your Samba shares and so on, but it's encrypted in your hard drive and not like just plain text, and a lot of stuff around that. So so 3.0 is the first version that is the same everywhere. So I'm quite happy about that. But we need to accelerate the big releases, I think.
Is the feature set compatible across all? Can I like play a file from a Samba share on my Android?
Yes. Well, you can also play an AVI and an SRT inside a zip, inside a folder, inside a zip on your SMB file, and on your SMB share, and it's going to open the zip, open the RAR, open the folders, and find there is a subtitle directly next to it and automatically detect it because it's the same name. So yeah, a lot of stuff like that would be closer to a light media center, but like we're very far from a media center, but that make a bit more sense.
Very cool.
So after that, probably VR. So we have patches for the VR headsets. I have no idea exactly what's going to happen with all those VR headsets and if people will care, but we have everything ready for that. And I'll probably start working on the UI and media library.
Right, so getting Oculus support into VLC, I'll be able to like download VLC from the Oculus store and play a video.
It actually works now. I got like patches for that. The question is whether we will send that from the Oculus store or just you run VLC, the normal VLC, and if you have an Oculus, it automatically detects that.
Gotcha.
So not a new 250 megabyte download Unity app that is extremely slow. It's just like, you got VLC and well, I detect there is an HMD. So also in 3.0, we added support for Chromecast, which was asked for so much time.
Right.
And when we did that, we didn't do it like just for Chromecast. We did it in a way so that we can extend for the future, so we can get AirPlay, UPnP, renderers, Miracast, or whatever the new format that will be.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It is, but it's cool.
How many commits would you say were in this last release? I think you had something on the
15,000 for the core and maybe 5,000 for Android and maybe a bit less for iOS.
That's incredible. It's an incredible amount of work.
It's a lot of work, and it's also very rare those days to have an open source software that is managed like that, because now most of the open source software are developed by big companies. Basically Google and Facebook are basically paying people to do that. It's their day job, right? They just in the end open source it. Doing the way the hippie communist, whatever you call it, old way, where we don't have features, we develop it, is quite rare. But also, most of the old way of doing open source and people who actually care about calling that free software have gone, right? The reason why I started the company was because startups are cool, and if you want to have like new people investing time, you need to do a startup. So I'm doing an open source startup, but because else you don't get people to actually develop on that, because they could work for and get $250,000 to $500,000 per year at Facebook.
Something else you mentioned at FOMS, which kind of blew my mind a little bit, but VLC.js. Can you tell us a little bit about?
So
what was the phrase that Steve Robertson used? This is a common phrase, but if it can be written in JavaScript, it will be written in JavaScript. So VLC now in JavaScript.
Well, the goal is not to have it in JavaScript. Yeah. Let's be very clear on that. I like one of the questions I always ask is like, but what is the future of VLC, right? Everyone is going to watch movies streamed directly online, whether it's legal or illegal. And so what is your value? And of course, there will always be value, but the value will be decreasing to the users. So there was always a discussion about how do we get VLC to run inside a web browser, whether we develop some kind of VideoJS clone, or when we discussed that, VideoJS didn't exist, but that was a long time ago. But stuff like that. Well, we are not really like the JavaScript guys. And in 2013, I guess the Firefox OS people asked us whether we could compile VLC for Firefox OS. And I say, okay, sure, give me threads. And they say, well, no threads. And I say, well, no VLC. You cannot have a media player without thread, because at least you need an audio and a video thread and an input thread, right? And a loop for demuxing. So I said, well, no way. But then started last year discussion about WebAssembly, and one of the goals of WebAssembly was to have pthread and modules. And like modules is exactly how VLC is, so that completely fits how we are. And threads say, well, we could do it, right? And there is a lot of value, right? When I talked about that last year, people just laughed and say, well, JB, you're insane, and actually did a demo. Why is it important? Because like today people use HLS.js, which is basically demuxing TS and HLS manifest in JavaScript in order to remux it in MP4, and then in order to basically feed that to the MSC, which just reads fragmented MP4. Like, really? Is that a sane way of CPU cycle? I don't think so. Let's be honest. I'm very, very respectful to the people who are doing that, because like, wow, that's like insane amount of work, extremely difficult work. And after writing a TS demuxer, I know that writing a full TS demuxer is extremely difficult, right? And also I found that the web is getting a bit ridiculous. Like, oh, there is a new fad, so let's add a web thing. So we have web VR, and then we have web joysticks, and like, at some point, the APIs are way too big, right? So in my opinion, it should just like have low-level APIs, and then you write your own stuff above it. And some people from the Internet Archive said, well, I want to play DVDs. And I'm just like, well, VLC was done to play DVDs. And they said, well, like, what would it take to actually have DVD playback? And I said, well, with Emscript 10 and pthread, well, it shouldn't be difficult, right, to get that. That's how we started, just to do a proof of concept, which actually works. And that is the surprising part, is that I spent some time this summer with another student, and actually kind of works. The question is, like, we have a proof of concept, right? The question is whether this will move to alpha, beta, or like actually something you can use. Well, this mostly depends on the browser people. But imagine in 1 year, we got WebAssembly, we got threads in WebAssembly, we got SIMD.wasm, and we managed to do something which cross-compile, transpile YASM assembly file to SIMD.wasm. The Chrome people actually export the API. They were exported to PP API to do the hardware decoders. And we have modules. Then, well, downloading the core VLC is just a few 100Ks of WASM byte stream or whatever. And then depending on the format, it's going to download the right module for the right format. And if you have had the hardware decoder for your format, then it's going to use the hardware. If you don't, it won't. And then you can manage to do stuff like that. So like, you want an AV1 decoder, like, write it in C and in assembly, but thinking that it will be compiled to WebAssembly. and smd.wasm. As soon as you get hardware decoder, then it will be offloaded. But if it's not, then you can still use all your machines and not say, well, I'm going to serve 3 times the content because I need one in HEVC for macOS and iOS and one on AV1 because YouTube does that for 4K. But for the rest, I need H.264. And, one is using some HLS, but the other one is using CMAF. And the last one is using Dash. Oh, no, wait. It's not Dash. It's 3 different of Dash because this version understand this one and this one is this one. And not even talking about DRMs, right? Like CBC via CTR and so on. And as soon as you got modules, well, maybe you want to write your own DRM. Write it as a VLC module. It will work in VLC.js. It will work on VLC on Android and the libVLC. So you can use it and write your plugin for your custom format and your custom codec or your custom DRM. Because maybe you can do stuff that makes sense. Maybe MP4 or MKV are not the best muxing formats and we can do better with less overhead. Maybe you have a very specific use case or you think that, well, HEVC is great, but I can do something very slightly different. And then you write your own. And VLC would be a good framework there where you actually plug your stuff and that's also something that people don't know is that VLC is not a player. It's actually a multimedia framework with around 500 modules that are loaded at runtime. Most of the people just click and use it at libVLC, but a lot of professionals can have their own format, right? It's very possible that this actually works, but it will mostly depend on whether the web browser people are going to do the right stuff.
And I think that's a fascinating thing you've touched on there, which is in a world where we have WebAssembly downloading essentially bytecode, we have all of these different APIs essentially replacing the OS APIs we knew and loved with something that's kind of cross-platform. It really does start to bring into focus okay, well, why do we have things like MSE and not hardware decoders exposed? Because when you're in this context, we already have people deploying out to production HLS.js, right? We're already deploying and running in the web browser full TS demuxing followed by full remuxing into FMP4. Why? We already demuxed the TS. If there was an AAC decoder, if there was an H.264 decoder, if there were primitives available to us on these platforms, we could use them. Right, we're good enough as developers to do that, whereas right now our hands are kind of being tied. Yeah,
and you're tied by what happens is in 2 years, Chrome decides that they don't ship an H.264 decoder anymore for, I don't know, patents reasons or because they want to push their own format. What do? You're just you spend so much time on that. Or why they decide that because of how they're doing CMAF, they're not going to support this FMP4 in the same way as they used to. And then you need to adapt. And also the schedule of releases of Chrome and Firefox is very difficult to follow. Sure, it's okay for a startup. It's okay for Justin TV and Twitch TV and other people like that. It is not okay for broadcasting people or people who have have a very slower ecosystem. And there are people who have a slower ecosystem that do make sense. You can't just everything is going to be replaced by startups because there are cases where you don't care. You don't care, and you need some slower innovation, and that's the problem. Is that now you have too much power, in my opinion, on a few actors, and so far they're great. Chrome is doing an amazing job, and Firefox is too. But what happens in 2 years? What happens in 5? You can't play your files anymore. What about 10? Right now we're talking 10 years, and also today we had DVDs. The Internet Archive has hundreds of thousands of DVDs. They can't play them because there is no way. And the only solution we have now is, a demo of an MPEG-2 video decoder in JavaScript, which is great. But the difficulty of a player is not just a decoder, right? It's having good audio-video synchronization, understanding bit rates, having a lot of features, detecting other files, and so on. And so I think that's one of the main point for interoperability, and also not only in space and number of formats, but also in the future and in the past.
Sounds like a very interesting project.
Well, I'm not sure it's the most interesting project I have. We have a project of running a kind of Chrome sandbox inside VLC, and I think that in the research it's more interesting than VLC.js.
Okay. Well, actually, I think up next on our schedule, Matt was talking about some of the future and what are the hard problems you're working on now.
Well, the hard problems, so there are the short-term one and the longer-term one. On short-term, now that the playback engine is way better and the same everywhere, we need a better UI and a kind of very light media library. So you can, because like a lot of audio software went away, iTunes is pure crap. And so you have a lot of files, and how do you manage that? A lot of people are using VLC for that, and that pains me. Like, well, maybe we should do something for people who play audio. So, but that's a short term, right? We have also the media library is already done for Android and iOS. It's in C++. We're going to use that on desktop. So that's for VLC4. VLC4 is also probably VR and some UI related to the media library. But that's not really difficult, right? It's already planned. We're also already working on that. This will happen. The more important stuff I'm working on are VLC.js and the sandbox stuff. And those are, I have no idea whether that's going to land in 6 months, probably not. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't know, but we'll find out.
So what is the sandbox stuff? Do you mind giving a little bit more information there?
Yeah, so the current approach of sandboxing is very bad. Well, it's great, but it doesn't fit the VLC module. What happens for VLC is that you're going to put VLC in the sandbox and you're going to give it all the rights. Well, I need to have access to your file, and without a file picker, because I'm going to open playlist or MKVs that are linked, or MXF that are linked, or MP4 that are linked, I need to open the subtitle that is the same name next to the file, etc., etc. So you're going to give me access to all your files on Windows, on your documents. So already VLC has access to way too much. On Linux, we had the issue where some security researchers sent us an exploit, and the exploit was actually not executing the calculator like they do, but actually reading .ssh and .gpg keys, private keys, and send that to a server, right? And that's where you realize that, holy shit, VLC has access to stuff it shouldn't have. Well, we need hardware decoding and video display. So we are on Windows in DWM mode, which is half the kernel, on Linux, X11 and DRM, so your root, so you can do anything on the machine. I need to have access to your audio output, which is I got access to your /dev DSP, and I can do so much with that. I need access to networking to play files, to play network streams. I need to open also sockets so you can control VLC, but I also need access to your /dev read-only on Linux to get V4L, DVD, Blu-ray, ASI, and so on. In the end, you realize that VLC has a good use case, like the browsers, for all the features that a sandbox could have. And that's bad. So what I want is not to do that, but to do exactly what Chrome is doing, which is basically you would split VLC into multiple processes. Basically, the demuxer would have like no rights because it's just data in, data out. The video decoder and video output would just get access to the graphic card, but it has access to no file system, no network, no audio. The audio has audio, but no. Mm-hmm. And the input has just like, depending if it's a network input or a file input, then it just has access to like network or file, but like only your home and not the whole system files, etc. And that's very difficult because we need to be able to pass huge buffers between processes in a cross-platform way. And that for every input, we recycle, destroy all this process and redo that. And the closest to that is a Chrome sandbox, but in performance, it's not yet there. And they have like different cases and important that are not exactly what we need. And also their code base for the sandbox is too big for us to maintain. So I want to do that, and that means we have a proof of concept based on threads, so not processes, that actually kind of works on Linux. But now we need to move that to multiple process VLC. And also it's really important, the OS is applying the rules. And that's one of the point where VLC is very good, is that if you would do that with GStreamer, every module would actually say, I need this right? So you do a ROG module, which needs all the rights, and boom, you do that. In VLC, because it's a bit more static multimedia framework, we launch a thread, and this thread is a video decoding thread, and this one will load modules. So it's easier to restrict the thread than having the modules, which means that the core VLC can apply different security models on the different threads/processes and not the module themselves. And that makes it way more secure. And also I can ask the kernel to actually apply the security and force it. So I think it's a very big project, but it's quite interesting. And I don't think anyone has done that correctly for now. So we'll see.
It sounds like a huge undertaking. I mean, how much of that is like rewriting the world, and how much of that is just kind of breaking things up? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So it's not that much.
Okay.
Because when you do a VLC modules is usually 1,000 lines of code. You basically have an API that is basically, like for a demuxer, reads data and output data. like output a track and get a stream. Whether this function is calling you on a pointer that is just your normal pointer or a shared memory isn't a big deal. So what's important is that the sandbox will not change a lot on the modules. And like VLC core is 100,000 lines of code, right? The whole VLC module is around 1 million and all the dependent libraries maybe 15 million. But the core is quite small and most of those changes will only be done in the core. So it's a lot of work, mostly because you need to find a good way to do IPC, cross-platform way, but it's not insane. We're talking about like a lot, like probably 4 people full-time for 2 years. Let's be clear on that, right? So we're talking about 1.5 million euros. But I think it's interesting enough that we should think about that. And also it will give us like the VLC multiprocess, which is mostly interesting for people who care about streaming, because basically your VLC could play whatever it plays and then pass that to the stream output, which would be actually in a different process or maybe a different Docker. And like you would have like a duplicate that. And then in a different Docker, you have the stuff that is taking the data and restream that to RTMP, another one to RTSP, and the other one to HLS, and the other one to Dash, because the VLC can do all those stuff. And then if one crashes, well, it doesn't crash the rest because those are different processes. If we manage to move VLC, libVLC framework to multiprocess, they give us other ideas that can be quite cool.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
What's the biggest problem you guys can solve in the next 5 years? I guess let's take that a little bit more meta. So not just like technically in the code base, like, but yeah, at a higher level, like in the video industry or consumer video world.
Who's going to buy your startup?
Those can be 2 different questions.
Okay, fair enough.
So, okay, I'm going to answer in a different way but I'm going to get to the point. I'm going to answer in, I think, 2 or 3 ways. The first thing is that on a very close time, I think we're going to invest quite a bit of time on AV1 and AOM. And VideoLAN is, in my opinion, one of the good entity to actually have decoders, new encoders, new tools around that, because VideoLAN can bridge between Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and so on, and the open source community. And we need some good open source tooling. So if we want to get AV1 good, not like the VP9 mistake. The second stuff is that where do we go for VLC? Well, you mostly know, right? And I'm going to spend a bit more time on other software related to VLC, but like the VLC needs to go in the JavaScript direction at the same time, the sandboxing and like the more faster and like better filters and so on. And also improve the libVLC framework, which is now, since VLC 3.0, actually usable and actually used in lots of applications. But the biggest question is not that one. The biggest question is like, does our project make any sense? Maybe yes for like people who are in the video industry, but outside, why does my mom care about VLC? Should she? And like, I think that we are at the problem that the question is not how do I play something, because basically this problem is solved. Everything from the open source technologies, from FFmpeg to libav to x264 and VLC got taken, reshared and so on, and finishes inside the web browsers, and everyone watches stuff online. So I think that the technical problem how to play is fixed. I think that we played a large part on that part, but I think it's fixed. So, but the biggest question today when you talk to people is not that one. The problem is, what do I watch and how? Because like people are cutting cable, of course, but everywhere they're just like watching a lot of TV shows and movies. And when you realize that the average American is watching 5 hours of TV per day and the average around European is 3.5 or something, like if you convert that to just TV shows, it means that you watch a whole season in 2 days. Well, 2 nights. So there is a lot of question.
I've never done that.
No.
I doubt it. I mean, like, how do people get that, right? So you got stuff from Netflix, which is great, but in the end, Netflix catalog is shrinking and it's not that big. And so what happens is that you're going to ask your friend, hey, I finished Westworld. You should say it's so great. And then people are going to say, oh, yeah, Westworld. Oh, so they're going to go discuss on Facebook, see the IMDb reviews and so on. And then what happens next? Oh, well, okay, where should I watch it? So they go, they start watching it. It's on 5 different platforms because one is on HBO, the other one is on Netflix, the one in Hulu. And you don't care. Like, you could even pay. It's just like, holy shit, I need to manage all that. And I don't know where to find. And then after you finish, you're just like, what episode I was? Oh, I don't remember. Oh, but yeah, because, you know, like, this is Thanksgiving. Well, outside of the US, no one has any idea that during Thanksgiving there is no TV show. Why do they not write during Thanksgiving? I mean, they wrote it like 6 months before, like, and stuff like that. And it's like, it's a huge pain to know what to watch. And even when you know, because you've discussed to your friend in real life on social network and so on, then you don't know where. And sometimes you watch so much stuff you don't remember if you've seen it. I mean, people who say, well, it never happened that I start watching a movie and then realize that I've already seen it. Everyone had that. Or you start an episode and you realize that, shit, I already saw that one, but I was like half sleeping. So there is a big, in my opinion, there is a big pain point here. And I'm working for a project around that, which would be a kind of Last.fm for video / TrackT / EMDB / kind of social network, but like an aggregator around videos. Like everything you watch, whether it's legal or illegal, gets added to your profile being public or private, I don't care. You can follow your friends, see the timeline, what they're watching, add that to your watch list, and then what you watch, you click on it and gives you the link to the right platform, whether it's legal or illegal, whether your input is legal or illegal, I don't care. What's important is that people know what to watch and know where they are in their all the videos they've been watching. And in my opinion, one of the biggest issue for piracy is not people who want free. It's just like convenience. Like try to watch, like Game of Thrones is out, try to see it in France in a correct version with French subtitle. It's impossible. It's so much pain. And I think that the problem for piracy is a question of demand. Like I don't know anyone left now who's pirating music or even video games. Steam and Spotify solve that. And I hope that Netflix would solve that, and it's not going to solve that. They are focusing on amazing shows. I love, if some people Netflix, I love your shows.
Second.
But yeah, so that's one of the projects I'm working on, and that could be something that get bought at some point. Mm-hmm. And the second project that is related to that is how do you do that when you're on your Apple TV and you have no plugins? Because it must be seamless. Like you install a small plugin on your VLT, on your Kodi, on your web browser, and everything you watch is sent, legal, illegal, doesn't care. So that I know what I've seen and my friends see what I've been watching. But how do you do when you're on a closed platform? Then you need to recognize what's on your screen. So we developed a video Shazam where you basically take your smartphone, more or less shoot your TVs, and it tells you what you're watching. So it's like video fingerprinting, but not in the usual way, because most of the usual video fingerprinting is done when you have access to the full stream, which is easier. But we have that, but also we developed the part where you actually turn your whole frame and basically it finds a way, even while not having the full correct frame.
So cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Is that open source?
No, that's not open source.
Smart.
Well, the two last projects I saw are not open source because of what you said. Maybe some people would acquire that. However, if someone give me enough money, and I'm not speaking of insane amount of money from the Silicon Valley, but just enough, then yes, I could open source that. If you got 10 million, send that. But I mean, like, why not, right? I don't care. I just need a way to keep putting good developers on important subjects around the open source community and around VideoLAN. And if this is what it needs, then why not?
Man, I really love your philosophy around open source. It's pretty awesome.
So those are basically the projects I am personally working on, mostly with a startup. If any of those projects will actually fly, what will happen is I will split the company and split the people.
And spin them out into their own entities.
Yes, because like, for example, VCs would hate what I'm doing, right? Because like...
No doubt.
Like JB, it's insane, right? You're supervising, in fact, 5 to 7 projects. One is VLC on Android in Java, one is in Go, one is in basically JavaScript. The 2 others are in C. Some are writing assembly code for decoders, and some people we are deploying consulting for streamers, people deploying FFmpeg and so on. And I'm also working on some stuff that basically is a recommendation engine and a video Shazam. And they're just like, you need to focus on one thing. And I fully agree with them. The thing is, all this goes inside the same direction. And that is the big picture they usually don't see. I understand that because it's more complex and there is a higher risk. So the people are less interested in investing. But like the stuff, like the recommendation part is basically server-side VLC, right? Like I could play anything. Now, what should I play? And it's going to be integrated in VLC, which is like your VLC account and like the Shazam videos, because I need to be able to say, well, I've been watching that. What do you think? Etc. Etc. And the stuff I'm doing on the VLC GS is basically I need to get VLC to actually go on, and that will go through the web, whether we like it or not. And same for the sandboxing, right? There is probably 300 million people using regularly VLC on their desktop, and their security is shit because we are just like a small team, and also because we are already, and we're going to be more and more a security target, because people now install on their machine an Office suite, a web browser, an image viewer, and a video player, right? And the first two are very secure, the last ones are not. And like VLC, with all the libraries we demux and decode and parse so many formats, there are hundreds of thousands of security issues. So all that goes into the same direction. Most of it is going to be open source. Some of it might not, because, well, you know, if that's a way to get money and get good engineer to work on the right and fun project, and not the Uber for tombstones or Uber for wheat delivery, or like you know, I mean, great, but like I want to do like actual technical innovation and not business model innovation.
One of those sounded dumb.
Well, the actual Uber for tombstone could actually work.
I think the other one might work a little better. That sounds like a big vision. I like it. Yeah, it sounds like you've got your work cut out for you.
Yeah, and actually on that note, you've talked about a ton of, as you said, really cool things to work on. Get your hands dirty. Like, so how do people get involved? How do people?
Yeah, what if I've got a spare afternoon one Sunday?
Well, the first thing is actually report bugs. Like, this is the first thing I ask for people to actually report bugs, because it's just like, oh, you know, VLC doesn't play this file for 6 months. I'm just like, did you think about reporting this bug? And they're just like, no, but I thought you knew. You know, I support like millions of different type of files. If you have an issue, report that. The second thing is actually compile VLC and work on the small features that you actually care about. Like, I did the Reddit Ask Me Anything like 2 weeks ago, and people were saying, oh, I need that. And those are like tiny features, and they're just like, oh, that would solve my life. And I'm just like, you know, coding that would take half a day. And then if you care more, then you can start actually working on VLC, on the security part, the JavaScript part, or actually go down to codecs and coders. We are going to have a lot of need for an correct open source AV1 encoder in the next year. How do we get to that, right? There are also projects around VideoLAN, because in my opinion, VideoLAN is just like the larger open source multimedia community. And VideoLAN today is not only about VLC. We are merging the Matroska nonprofit into the VideoLAN nonprofit. And people ask me, well, would you host MPlayer? Yeah, sure. Like, my competition is not MPlayer. My competition is Real Player or BS Player, or all those people who still it's okay to run non-open source codec packs on their machines. There are also other projects than VLC and stuff that are very interesting on a lower level. There is lots of stuff to do on HDR. Today, HDR is very bad. You have no clue about quality, and like quality of video encoding is a very big topic. And until last year, we had all with the same PSNR and SSIM until Netflix came with VMAF, which has great points, but also like weak points. Like, why do we care about video quality only now, right? So there are many projects around video that should be done as open source project, and VideoLAN is probably one of the right place to actually join and do other projects around.
This was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, JB.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
That's all we have for today, but as always, we'd love to hear what you thought, even if you disagree, so please reach out on Twitter @Demuxed.
To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com, and while you're there, be sure to check out their library. It's packed with amazing talks on sales, marketing, product, and general management from founders of developer tools companies and other industry leaders.